There we go. Good morning. Good morning, Leah. Give me just a second. Move some windows around. I have been told that my audio, compared to most people's videos on YouTube, is fairly quiet, and I don't exactly know what to do to fix that. However, I did realize when I did my really quick mic change a few episodes ago, I apparently put this microphone in backwards, and so I've been able to hear that things sound a little bit different. My glasses. I was like, why can't I see? We're doing it without glasses today. I put my microphone into this stand backwards. For today's episode, I feel like I wanted to wrap up a few concepts from Monday's discussion that I felt like I wasn't really able to touch on completely. So on Monday we were talking about purpose, finding our sense of purpose, and that's something that Leah and I have both been really struggling with the last couple of months. And Leah especially in the last little while has been wrestling with that question. And I think it's hard because to some degree, I think believing in destiny or this idea that we have one purpose is kind of nice. It gives you this sense of certainty, kind of like soulmates. Leah and I just watched the 4 seasons show, miniseries thing on Netflix, and they talked about soulmates, and so I've been subconsciously thinking about soulmates the last couple of days. But the idea of having just one thing that is your destiny or your path or where you're supposed to be, the person you're supposed to be with, whatever, makes it a lot easier to handle the decisions that we've made, because if we just assume that we've made the one correct decision that we needed to make, there's no reason to really worry about it. So you assume that the person you're with is your soulmate, the one person in the entire world that you're supposed to be with, and you assume that the thing that you're doing is your destiny. And I don't think that's a bad way of thinking about it. I think that's a great way of thinking about it. But I don't think that it's predestined necessarily. I think that because if that was the case, that kind of undermines the idea of agency, free will, the ability to choose what you want to do with your life. So, but what it does do actually is acknowledges where you are now in your story. And the way that I've thought about purpose individuality, destiny, whatever you might think or call it, is sort of like a tree. I imagine this, the tree of destiny, and obviously you have like a trunk, which is a pretty thick, important piece of the tree, and it's generally going to grow in one direction up, and it's pretty steadfast in where it wants to be. And I feel like that's sort of what you might call a person's purpose, but it's more so just their strengths and weaknesses. They're who they are as an individual, right? Like, don't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree kind of thing. Some people are really good at math. Some people are really good at art. Some people are good at a lot of things, and it's really hard for them to decide what they want to do. Which I think is one of the problems that Leah has been having with deciding what she wants to do and who she wants to be, is that she is multi-talented, very intelligent. She could do whatever she wanted to do. When you have all of those choices, it's like, how do you figure out what you want to do? Hola, Colin. Good morning. Colin is another example of somebody who's multi-talented. He could easily be the best bartender to ever grace the sands of Florida's beaches and make fantastic tiki drinks. But he's in the Navy, flying attack helicopters, being a total badass. That's his destiny at the moment. We're talking about destiny this morning, purpose, a little bit more about the core where my theories come from. So like I said, I feel like we have a trunk, but it's more so based off of who we are as an individual, less about like destiny. It's just sort of, we're naturally inclined to be good and bad at certain things, and so that should push us in certain directions. The issue and the challenge comes when we feel like we need to be something different. Leah is very type A. She's a fantastic organizer. I have ADHD, and that's an excuse to a degree, but it's also a strength and a weakness. I'm really good at handling situations where there is no plan and things are just kind of going crazy. In an emergency, I am very clear-headed. I actually, a few months ago, when I was walking through Walmart, and I walked past an aisle that I wasn't supposed to be going down because it was the wrong aisle. But I saw this like group of people kind of gathered near the other end of the aisle, and I was like, okay, that's too many people. I'll come back to this aisle later when all of those people have left. But then like at the last second, as I was walking past the aisle, I noticed that there was like a kid laying on the ground. And my first thought was like, oh, there's just some kid having a temper tantrum on the ground, right? And then I noticed that like there was a woman kneeling next to him and like kind of looking a little bit panicked. And that was sort of like after I'd walked past the aisle. Like I saw the picture in my head for just a couple seconds longer. And I was like, okay, wait, that's not right. Went and looked back down the aisle, and she's like now doing chest compressions on this kid. And I didn't like, I just sort of ran down the aisle, super like power slid in on my knees. At least that's what the cinematic version of the story is. My hair like flowing in the wind. That's inappropriate. We're talking about a kid almost dying. I don't need to be making jokes. But anyways, I like got down, made sure somebody had called 911, asked like what was going on as I'm like putting my, obviously I was in Boy Scouts, growing up Mormon, everybody's in Boy Scouts. So I've had my CPR training, got my life-saving merit badge. Lean down next to the kid's mouth. I'm like checking to see if his chest is rising, trying to hear and feel any breath on my cheek and on my ear. not getting anything. I'm asking like if he was eating anything or chewing on anything, or if he has any like conditions. And the mom is like, I don't know. He was like, I don't know if he had something in his mouth. Like I don't know what's going on. So she couldn't get his mouth open to check because he was just clenching his jaw so much. And so I like slid my fingers in between his teeth and then just kind of like pried his jaw open. There wasn't really anything in there, but it seemed like he was just kind of choking on spit. So I reoriented him a little bit, and probably wasn't 100% necessary, but I did the Heimlich a few times, just a couple quick pulls, and he coughed a little bit and started breathing. And like the whole time I was just totally calm. Nothing was bothering me. I was just like, this is the normalest situation I've ever been in. And that's sort of like a strength of my ADHD brain. I believe I'm able to kind of handle those situations pretty effectively. But then ask me to figure out a plan for travel or a business, and I'm like, I have the idea at the end, and I kind of have like this exciting energy at the beginning, but all of the stuff in the middle, terrible at. That's Leah's strength. And my entire life I've been told that I kind of need to develop where my weakness is, when in reality I think people need to lean into their strengths and kind of be okay with having weaknesses and acknowledging like, yeah, I'm not super good at that part. I can learn, I can develop that skill. But to a degree, leaning into your strengths, I think will help you figure out where you should be and the direction that you should go in for yourself and for your life. And so if we imagine this pressure to be a fish that climbs trees, it's like as our trunk is growing, we're putting something in the way of our tree trunk, and trees will grow around things. But it's not super good for their stability, for their growth. Like a tree that grows around a fence might get sick, might be weaker, might blow over in a storm, something like that, right? So to a certain extent, it's good to just sort of let your trunk establish itself, go in the direction that it should. And if you've ever like spent time around kids, helping them learn or grow, you'll notice they have natural curiosities, natural skills, natural talents that they seem to just gravitate in that direction. And my theory around that is somewhat sort of like about our instincts and our genetics, right? So I've talked a little bit about how a baby cow, a calf, can walk the moment that it's born because it needs to know how to walk the moment that it's born or it will die. Human babies don't really need to know how to walk the moment that they're born. And so that's a piece of information that doesn't really need to be passed on genetically. We can learn that. But humans are a lot more complex than cows, right? But it's more so in our psyche, in our brains, in our relationships. The most complex part about being human is how we relate to other humans, how we fit within the species, navigate social situations. That's our strength as humans, right? It's the power of the tribe. And the most powerful tribes, the strongest groups of people, are going to have people with a variety of strengths, talents, and skills. So, genetically speaking, we're going to have certain strengths and skills. And we are a combination of our parents, our mom and our dad, and then all of their genetic history, right? So, if you take two people with different personalities, different strengths, different ways of thinking, different ways of being, and imagine like their entire family tree, genealogical history. I don't know what the word exactly would be. But like people will say like, oh, being an X, Y, or Z, like being a shoemaker is in my DNA, it's in my blood, right? Like, I think literally it is. If you look at your family history and you see like what people did for a living or what they were good at or like what they were known for, I kind of believe that genetically speaking, you're going to be better at those types of things. And the majority of our genetic information when it comes to like the sperm and the egg is going to be dedicated towards brain power and less towards physical attributes like being able to walk, like those types of instincts, pre-programmed behaviors. Because, like Colin says, big brains cost a lot of energy. Our brains are ridiculously complex, and our personalities are ridiculously complex. So, to make room for that, we don't know how to walk when we're born. But it seems like we don't know how to do anything when we're born because we're a baby. We don't know how to talk. We don't know how to do nothing, right? I don't know nothing. I'm a baby. But there's a seed. And there's actually something called seed theory, where the idea is that like all of the code or the entire tree is contained within the seed. So you have this baby, and it's a seed, and it's destined to grow in a certain way, but not because of quote unquote destiny, because of genetic variation. You're taking the strengths and weaknesses of a mother and the strengths and weaknesses of a father, and you're just kind of combining it in a random way, and you're getting this unique combination of personality, trauma, inclinations, strengths, weaknesses, so and so, like take it on and on and on. And we even know that trauma can be passed on genetically. People who survived the Great Depression and went through like extreme hunger and extreme poverty, that genuinely changed their DNA and affected their ancestors. But over generations, that can be processed. I think that light just got brighter. Good morning, sunrise. I think it's continuing to get brighter. It's freaking me out. Anyways, point is, our trunk. We all have strengths and weaknesses, and it's literally built into our DNA. But we don't know what it is, right? Like you can't really read the map of your DNA. The same way that you can't look at a seed for a tree and know exactly what the tree will look like in the future. It's just going to react and respond in unique ways to the environment around it, which is why I use this Plinko machine analogy, right? Depending on where you place those pegs in the Plinko machine, it's kind of like and or gates in code, right? Like true or false, if this, then that. And you have this multi-layered, ridiculously complex web of if-then statements. So as a person is going through their life, they're going to respond in unique ways. And it's actually beneficial and advantageous for the human species to respond in your unique way. As I mentioned, if every human being was the exact same and we went through, like, let's say every human being was really good at math and planning, and then one emergency situation happened that was unable to be planned for and math was not helpful for, now the entire species dies because nobody has that strength or that specialization. Well, I like that word specialization because ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is literally just a different brain structure. And my uncle, Dr. Aaron Dodini, is a psychologist who specializes in ADHD. And one of the ways that he explains to his patients or people that he's done an ADHD diagnosis for what ADHD really is it's more of a specialization. So in the same way that Leah is not super great at handling emergency situations, my specialization allows me to run into a situation, quickly assess what's going on, take as much information as possible in, and then make a decision very quickly. So I don't really believe in destiny, but I do believe in strengths, weaknesses, and specializations. And that it's okay to be different, it's okay to be unique, and in fact it's advantageous and it's beneficial to be the most yourself that you could ever be. Because who knows, maybe you're the one person who's going to survive a crazy situation that comes up for humanity. We need your strengths and your weaknesses and your specific way of responding to a situation to survive. If we all responded the exact same way, humanity wouldn't be able to adapt. Evolution would not be a thing if we weren't unique individuals. You have to have strengths in order for survival of the fittest to work. And this is actually an interesting direction maybe to go in. One of my favorite verses in the Book of Mormon is Ether 12:27, and every single time I would ever give a lesson or a talk, I would find a way to incorporate this verse. The verse goes, "And if men come unto me, I will show unto them their weakness. I give unto men weakness, that they may be humble, and my grace is sufficient for all men that humble themselves before me. For if they humble themselves before me, and have faith in me, then will I make weak things become strong unto them." Wow. Traumatizing to read that a little bit, but also hopeful. I found this verse, I was in the temple, and I kept opening the Book of Mormon and just trying to be like, I think I was trying to figure out if is this whole thing real? Like I want some sort of sign. And I kept opening the Book of Mormon and reading the first verse, because there's this thing where they say just open it to a random page and just read a random verse and it'll solve all of your problems and answer all of your questions. So I kept doing that, and I would read the verse and it'd be something silly and it came to pass my grandpa was also Nephi. And I'd be like, that's not helpful. So then I'd do it again. And I literally couldn't find anything remotely helpful doing that. But then I was like, I'll just look at the table of contents. And the coolest name, in my opinion, is Omni and Ether. And I was like, I'm going to go with Ether. Seems cooler, ethereal. And then my favorite number is 12, and I was born on April 27th. So I just went to this verse because I was like, these are numbers and letters that are related to me. And I read it. And if men come unto me, I will show unto them their weakness. I give unto men weakness, that they may be humble. And at the time, I had a weakness. At least what I was told was a weakness. I was a horny teenager, and I was really trying to stop that. And so this verse spoke to me. I was like, I have weaknesses. And I do think that we are purposely, genetically programmed to have weaknesses. And to an extent, I do agree that it helps us to humble ourselves. It helps us to recognize we aren't the end-all be-all. We're not the ultimate perfect being, and we need to rely on other people to help us with our weaknesses. And it's not necessarily that we need to overcome our weaknesses or turn our weaknesses into strengths. But if we just acknowledge and recognize our weaknesses, we can either turn to people who will help us develop those weaknesses and turn them into strengths, or we can just find people to help support us, because we don't have to be completely self-sufficient, contained like as one individual being that can do everything. Which is something that I'm actually like trying to learn myself. And something that the church teaches is to like be self-sufficient, to not rely on other people. But I think that is misguiding. I think some of the best friendships and relationships and coworkers, acquaintances, peers that we have are people that complement our weaknesses. It's one of the reasons why I love yin yang, or yin and yang, masculine, feminine, light and dark, opposites attract, positive and negative, magnets, all of that stuff. Like, we are meant to have a light and a dark side, strengths and weaknesses. And we find people that complement us. And Leah says, I also think though that on a day-to-day basis, it's difficult if one person is good in emergencies and then the other person is good at day-to-day. It can feel very uneven. Yes, because day-to-day happens every day. Emergencies don't happen very often. And so it's like, I'm really good in an emergency. And your life is good because the person who's good at day-to-day things keeps things good. There aren't very many emergencies coming up. So it's uneven. I'm still working on that. But I also think well, okay, first of all, obviously Leah is talking a little bit about our situation, and it's a little complicated because not only am I bad at planning or like consistent rhythms, partially because of my ADHD, partially because of my life experiences, but I'm also like pretty friggin' depressed, or have been. And so within our relationship, Leah pulls the majority of the weight. I told our therapist, like, I think I'm 30% as productive as Leah. And I recognize that a lot of Leah's strengths are more useful on a day-to-day basis. And so I am trying to work on those things. And I don't want to just put the weight on someone else because I have a weakness, right? And I think that's something that we all do. I'm curious if anybody has something that they feel like is a weakness that somebody in their life compensates for or fills in. I'd love to hear how you navigate that, or how you accept that help as well. Going back to things. Okay. Purpose. Whoa. That was a loud pop. We don't know. Like I was saying, we don't know what the tree will look like simply by looking at the seed or analyzing the seed. In the same way that we don't know our strengths and weaknesses until we are in situations that help us to manifest things, right? And it's more so, like I said, a series of if-then statements and or Plinko pegs in a Plinko machine, right? In a unique configuration. So when you go into a situation and you have external stimuli, you're putting quarters in the top of your Plinko machine, you don't know where it's going to go until you literally see it happen. And that experience happens. Then you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I am good at this, or I'm not that good at this. This is something I can work on, because we have neuroplasticity. We can change our brains. We can change our DNA. We can change our body. We can adapt and evolve within this lifetime. It isn't just like over the course of multiple generations. And so as you're going through your life, you will find things that you're not good at, and you will find things that you are good at. And sometimes we look at this maybe timeline or list of things that like good at, bad at, and we try to use that to predict where we should go. We have this question like, what am I supposed to do with my life? Who am I supposed to be? What should my career be? All of that stuff, right? And we can take into account everything that we've learned about ourselves. But that doesn't mean we need to, like, once the tree's a little bit grown, you've got like a sprout, right? It's no longer just a seed. You just still don't know exactly what the tree's going to look like. You can start to predict, like, okay, you can see there's a branch splitting off right here. That's not going anywhere. That branch is generally going to stay there, and it will become part of the tree. But each one of those branches will probably split into even more branches, and those branches themselves will split into more branches, which is also kind of the way that I think about purpose, destiny, right? You have your trunk, and that's kind of like your core, who you are, the direction that you will naturally go in because of your innate strengths and weaknesses. Generally, I feel like if somebody has a massive inclination towards math, right, and they like scored perfect on the ACT, and they're just big brain, opposite of smooth, just like totally wrinkly in there, many folds, they are likely going to do something in that direction. And so as their trunk is forming, they are likely going to just continue to grow in the direction of their trunk. It's pretty uncommon for somebody to suddenly just pivot and be like, I'm actually going to be a concert pianist. I mean, maybe they would be. Totally possible. But I'm just saying, like, there are parts of us that are pretty core and essential, and I would say those are parts of our trunks. And then as you grow and advance, 20 years old, 25 years old, 30 years old, you've got a pretty well-established, solid trunk. But that doesn't mean that you're like pigeonholed or stuck in this one path, because you have so many directions that you can go in from that one trunk. So many branches, so many leaves, so many possible futures come from one trunk, from one core, one seed. So don't necessarily feel like, oh, I have all these natural strengths and weaknesses, and this is my trunk, and so now I'm like destined to be a civil engineer and design roads because I'm good at math. Like, that is such a concrete way of living. If we were just a trunk, if we were just one single, like, maybe like a pine tree, but with no branches at all, just one little straight toothpick of a person, one-dimensional, then sure, maybe you are born and you're like, you know exactly who you're going to be, and you just go and you do it, and you're happy and you're satisfied, and you're like, this is perfect. And I'm envious of those types of people, because it sounds so easy to just like know where you want to go and just work towards one goal, one direction, to not really feel like you have all these branches to explore. And it's not a good or a bad thing. Like, I'm not looking at an oak tree with a ton of branches and saying that's a better tree than a pine tree. They're both trees, and they both have their purpose and their place And the most beautiful landscapes, the most beautiful forests, have a variety of trees. I'm reading this book because my therapist told me I needed to read it. It's called No Bad Parts by Richard C. Schwartz. Healing Trauma and Restoring Wholeness with the Internal Family Systems Model. Colin, actually, and we talked a little bit about parts work. And no bad parts is this idea that like we kind of respond to our environments, and we develop parts of ourselves that help us to survive in those environments. Internal family systems is like you have all of these different parts of your consciousness, of your psyche, sort of like dissociative identity disorder, I think is what it's called, DID. DID stands for dissociative identity disorder, formerly known as multiple personality disorder. Yeah. So DID is like you have parts in your system, and certain parts can take over as like being in the chair or the seat of consciousness, like they have the steering wheel. And the disassociative part is the idea that like while one of those parts is in the chair, the other parts are like kind of pushed off to the side. And this is a trauma response because somebody goes through an experience that requires them to have like a dramatic shift in their personality or the role that they play, to the point where they have to like disassociate to protect the rest of the brain. So like one part of their psyche will take the wheel for a minute, and all the other parts go hide in the corner. That's my analogy, my interpretation of the theory. I don't think you'll find that in a textbook. But I wanted to quickly read Colin's comment here. He says, I like the metaphor that we are gardeners. Each plant we nurture is a different skill or strength, and our soil naturally helps certain plants grow. I like that too. Yeah, that we are the soil and the gardener. And so certain things, like if you have clay, like a pretty clay-based soil, or a soil that has a lot of nitrogen, or other things that are related to plants, then certain plants are going to grow really well there. So I like that too. That's a really good way of thinking about it. But back to no bad parts. Reason why I bring that up is because we're not one-dimensional beings. Like in the same way that, like if we think about Colin's analogy, we don't just have one type of soil. We have a whole plot of land, and maybe over here there's a pond with a bunch of clay soil, and maybe over here there's very aerated soil and tons of worms, and over here you have like, I don't know, there was a fire, and so nothing grows until life comes back to the area, and it's a beautiful new forest. I don't know. And Colin just said, it doesn't mean that we can't grow any certain strengths or skills. It just means that some will take more work. Yep. Yeah, I agree. I think to tell somebody that they can't do something or they can't be something is wholly false. I'm a firm believer that any person can learn anything. They just need to fill in the blanks. I think when I was in school, I think I mentioned in an earlier episode, I used to raise my hand and ask questions that I knew the answer to, that like I didn't really need to know the answer to that question, but I could tell that either the teacher like kind of skipped something, glossed over something, or somebody in the room just wasn't following. And so I would ask questions to kind of like add more dots. I think of it like connect the dots, right? You're trying to draw this picture of a concept, math, biology, whatever, right? And the goal of a good teacher is to put a dot in enough places that the student can connect all of those dots and draw the picture of the full concept. And where people fail and feel that they can't learn something or can't be something is when they don't have enough dots. And maybe they're missing fundamental dots. Like, for me, the last grade of a school that I did was 5th grade. So when I went to college, I was missing a lot of dots. Like, there was this big gap of middle school and high school, and then I had college. And so a lot of my time in my first few years, or my first 2 semesters actually, I think is about how long it took me, was just trying to catch up and fill in the blanks of all of those dots. And fortunately, that's something I'm naturally good at and inclined to do. It's a strength that I have. I'm good at inferring. I think I have a great sense of intuition when it comes to filling in those dots. But stop distracting me, Colin. You know I have ADHD. I can't stay on topic. Just kidding. That's not your fault. And this was a good direction to go in, I think. Because I don't want anybody to leave this conversation. Any of the 4 people. Hi, Mom. Just kidding. I don't think my mom watches this. I don't want anybody to come away thinking that they should be limited by the weaknesses that they have. That does not mean you can't do something. It just means you might need to put in a little bit more work to fill in those dots, like Colin was saying. To nurture those plants, the skills and the strengths that you want to grow. Did I bring my notebook in here? I meant to. I did not. Another time. So what does all of this mean? What's the point of this? Whether you're into music, engineering, coding, art of other types besides music, whether you're shy, outgoing, lean into yourself, tune in. I think part of what I was trying to get to is that you can never predict. When you put a quarter in the top of a Plinko machine or whatever, I don't know what you put in the top of a Plinko machine. I just like the word Plinko. It's a fun word to say. Plinko. You can't predict where that's going to go. So spend less of your time, less of your energy worrying about where you're going to go, and put more quarters, put more experiences into your machine. And you'll learn simply by going through that. Whoa. I don't know if you can hear this song, but it's got some Legend of Zelda. This song is called Getting Lost by Veritas. In case anybody's wondering. I like it. Getting distracted again. Put more balls in your Plinko machine. Because apparently you put balls into Plinko. Put more balls in your Plinko machine. Have more experiences. Don't be afraid. Like, if you put a ball in your Plinko machine and it ends up in the not good pile, okay. It's not that big of a deal. There's tons of balls in the ocean. Let's go fishing. Spend less time trying to predict your Plinko machine. The incredibly complex strengths, weaknesses, code, variations of who you are as an individual. More time just watching it unfold, like that's the story, right? You have as I've mentioned, we have the left hemisphere of our brain that I think is more of a representation of who we define as I, like the ego, maybe when we say ourselves, I think part of that is at the left side of our brain. And I think all of the code, all the instructions, the seed, our strengths and weaknesses, a lot of that stuff is in our right side of our brain. And as I've mentioned, it's connected by a little TV screen called the corpus callosum. I need to learn how to pronounce that. But the idea is like, just go put yourself into experiences and witness how you respond, because some of it's going to be unconscious, and especially if we tune into how we're feeling in a certain situation. People always say, like, follow your heart, listen to your gut, you'll make better decisions that way, right? Like, what does that even friggin' mean? I don't know about you guys, but I have tummy problems, so my gut is not very easy to understand. I get all sorts of rumblies and grumblies in different parts of my tum-tum, and that's not English, so how am I supposed to follow that? Well, we're not actually saying, obviously, follow your gut or follow your heart. We're saying tune into your body, tune into the sensations, the emotions, the feelings. All of that stuff is the right hemisphere of your brain. So if we take a moment to connect the left and the right hemisphere of your brain by tuning inwards, listening, we are more likely to find situations that align with our strengths and our weaknesses. We'll put ourselves into situations where we feel more comfortable or well-equipped, naturally inclined, that we have instincts or intuition that's going to guide us, because we have a book, essentially, of instincts and intuition in our right side of our brain, but there is a limited amount of space. That's why we don't know how to walk when we're born. And some people are going to have different strengths and weaknesses. So go out. Teach your left brain. Teach the left side of your brain where you are naturally good. Where do you have your instincts and your intuitions? But also, some of that stuff's not useful. And like Leah said, sometimes if someone's good at the day-to-day and another person's good in emergencies, you're going to have to develop those strengths or work on your weaknesses so that you can function and survive. Because, and this actually goes to kind of a more, maybe a more meta perspective of like day-to-day. Part of that is like our day-to-day, our modern day-to-day, Leah's strengths are more appreciated because we live in a modern day that is more structured. So our day-to-day is like, wake up, go to work, go home, maybe have dinner, or like go to a class or something, like go work out, go on a walk, and then go to sleep. It's like the same thing every single day. So that consistency, that rhythm, the ability to function in repeatable, consistent environments is more valuable in this modern world. We've built a society that doesn't really need the strengths or the specializations of the ADHD brain anymore as much as it used to. And actually, hold on, that is a complete fallacy. What I just said is wrong. That's, scratch that from the record. We do still need the neurodivergent, the specialized brains. Many of the greatest advancements of human history come from people who think in unique and different ways. So don't think that just because you don't fit the mold perfectly doesn't mean that you aren't valuable. And I don't think anybody's saying that. But I think it's a way that we sometimes feel. And I've said this in therapy. I say the thing is, like, I know I have strengths, and Leah is really good in these other areas, but like the things that she's good at are like actually like genuinely important. Like, I'm inconsistent. I'm bad at day-to-day rhythms, doing the same thing every day. And that's something that is valuable in this world. Like, objectively, like, I look at myself and I think that is a weakness, that is a flaw, that's something that I need to fix. In college, for example, this is probably the easiest way to demonstrate the example or the difference between Leah and I. I would wait until 11 p.m. the night that my homework was due to start working on it. Because then that's when I started to get the anxiety and like feel the like, this is an emergency. And so then I was like, let's lock in. Let's do this. Whereas Leah, the student athlete, employed, sometimes full-time, sometimes part-time, like putting herself through school and getting a 4.0 by the end of her time graduating. See, I only got a 3.9. She got a 4.0. She's better. And she was less stressed because she wasn't waiting till the last possible second. Or maybe she was more stressed because she was constantly trying to get things done ahead. I don't know. But the point is, you look at the way Leah did school and the way I did school, and every single person's probably going to say, Leah did that right. That's the better way to do it. Yeah, that's smart. And then they look at me and they're like, that guy's, how did he even survive? And this is a good point too. Leah just said, I also don't necessarily look at them as strengths because I have worked on them and put a lot of effort into working on them for years. So I don't think they came as naturally as you say. That's true. Executive function, consistency, being a planner, all that stuff still requires work. And I'm not trying to dismiss that. I think to an extent you grew up in an environment that fostered that for you because of your family and your situation that you were in. So I think like, and you had kind of like role models. You had people modeling being on top of things and being in control or being like consistent and planned. Whereas I did not have that modeled for me. So, I mean, again, like our environments, nature versus nurture, right? I think is what it is. It's a combination of both. It always is. And we have the power to control how we nurture ourselves and the world. And certainly we have nature, we have our strengths, our inherent things that we are likely going to be better at. And the fact that I have ADHD sort of vindicates. Is that the correct word? What does that actually mean? Vindicates. Clear someone of blame or suspicion. Show or prove to be right, reasonable, or justified. Yeah, there you go. That's sort of the right word. My ADHD sort of vindicates my inconsistency because it's something that like we kind of know about ADHDers is that the things that I'm pretty terrible at they're naturally terrible at. So it's not like, and vindicate, I don't mean to say like makes it okay for me to have this weakness. Validates, yeah, validates is another good reason. Like, you wouldn't look at me knowing that I have ADHD. You wouldn't look at me and say like, what's wrong with that guy? Why is he so inconsistent and bad at this? You'd be like, oh yeah. It's like looking at a truck versus like a Ducati and being like, why can't the Ducati drive up the rocks? It's like it's just a different brain. You're not thinking to yourself, that guy didn't do anything right. He didn't learn it. He didn't put in the work to become disciplined. I don't know. I think we're done here. I think I've wrapped up my point. You're valuable just the way you are. Certainly we have weaknesses that we can work on, and certainly we have strengths that we can develop and continue to learn how to utilize more effectively. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we live in a world that is very structured, very consistent, and some people are going to have a hard time finding their place in said world. Because we're all different and we're all unique. We used to live in a world where we didn't know what was going to happen every single day. We would wake up and walk out of our caves and we would say, okay, like, let's try not to die and get some food. You know, we have to remember where we come from. We weren't necessarily evolved to function in a 9-to-5. And this world, this society, the way that we have things structured is so just like warped. I had a whole conversation, and I plan to do an episode called Follow the Prophet, but instead of spelled Prophet, like the prophet of the Mormon Church, Follow the Prophet with an F. Corporate profits. But I had a whole conversation with Gemini 2.5 Pro preview with deep research enabled, trying to figure out how much money the 90%, the 99% make in comparison to the 1% and corporate profits, in terms of time, because time is money, right? And looking at all of the numbers and then making an estimate by taking like the wages of the bottom 90% compared to the wages of the top 10% plus corporate profits, because I think that the majority of people who are making over, let's say the top 90% of earners make like something like $300 and something thousand a year, which is probably more than they should be making. I don't know. Point is, 50% of the work that you're doing, if you're part of that 90%, the average American, 54.02% of the value generated by your labor is harvested for the 10% and corporate profits. And that equates to approximately 136.79 billion hours of American time contributes to the wages of the 10% and corporate profits. If you look at it as like just corporate profits, then it's more like 24%. So there's multiple ways to calculate that, but we live in a world that is unfair, uneven, not built for how we naturally evolved as humans. So don't be too hard on yourself. If you feel like you don't fit in right now, if you feel like this world is a struggle, if you feel like life isn't making sense to you, I'm sure you'll find where you belong, where you want to be, who you are in time. Thank you for being here. I love you. Truly. Thank you. I will see or talk to you on Friday. Bye.